time for another round of Brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand. With your hosts, Reilly, Newman, and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
Welcome back to another round of Brandy.
Yes.
In brand news, we actually have a very, very, very large automobile company that's actually, they're doing a bit of a throwback.
Yeah, and again, it's a little a visual brand tweak, but it's Honda.
And what's interesting about it is that, I think it was 2 years ago, we did an episode on it, but they introduced their electric line, which I think Honda's always been more hybrid focused, not full electric. I don't think they ever fully jumped into full electric, but they did have a lot of hybrid and they're going more electric. But they had this line that was more focused on that to compete with Teslas and all of that. And they had this revised logo. And what's interesting about this logo is that it actually harkens back to like the 60s of what their logo was between like 61 and 69. And it's slightly wider. It's not as polished looking. It kind of has a little more, it's not as rounded and soft.
It looks a little more hand tooled.
Yeah.
Right? Because in the 60s, it was pre-computer, so it would have been, pen and ink rendered. It has a very retro, there's a sense of familiarity with it, which I think is great. That's what you want. Like a rebrand should have that sense of familiarity. Now, what I'm curious about, is it going to then be doing some product redesigns and introducing some of vintage design from some of their cars during that period, similar like for bringing the Bronco back, or when Dodge brought the Challenger and the Charger back, and they were new vehicles, but they stayed true to their design aesthetics that made them feel like they were of that era.
I think the EV trend was like the end of the design language of like super smooth, like everything like being rounded and bubbly and smooth. I think people are tired of that. And so even like this logo, it looks a little more like the angles are a little sharper. It just feels, I don't know, it's not as smooth and bubbly and like chrome, right? You think of Honda, you think of like the logo being chrome and rounded and like all this like just bubbly. And I think that's going to be a trend, because there have been concept cars that have been like almost like cars from the 80s and stuff like that, where they're very boxy looking, and people love them. And even you look at Slate that's coming out that Jeff Bezos backed, where it's pretty much like that module car or the truck that we've talked about. Very boxy, very interesting looking. And I think I feel like the pendulum's swinging, where you're going to see cars with a little more edge, and not as much as like Cybertruck, but like not that far. But I think you're going to see just a little more like of that.
Well, even like
different design.
It makes me think of even like the angularness of like the old DeLorean. Like you think of Back to the Future with the DeLorean, the design of the DeLorean, where it had some areas, but even like some of the straight lines and flat paneling. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see. But that's kind of on the brand news of a move that they're making, and in their quest to reposition and rebrand themselves, which is a perfect segue into what we're going to be talking about today, right, Reilly?
Right. Today's topic is focused on rebranding not being like a one-time event. You don't launch
a light
rebrand.
Switch.
Right. Yeah, and it's this thing that's grown over time. It's a transition, it's a transformation, it's an evolution. And I think even this Honda example is a good example of that too, where you've seen this brand evolve over time, and even now they're pulling back from the history and pulling that forward instead of just always. It's like almost like avoiding doing progress for progress' sake, but going, okay, what are valuable things from our history? And again, they're not just taking their logo from the 60s and reapplying it. It's refined a little more. It's a little less wide than the 60s one. So it just kind of shows that evolution. And I think that's where rebrand gets put in a nutshell, is that people think it's this one-time thing where this big grand reveal, do some fanfare, you do a couple social media posts, and then it's done. And that to me is like how you really, as a business and a brand, you shoot yourself in the foot doing that.
Yeah. Well, and we're rolling into, we're in January. I mean, I'm trying to live out some of my New Year's resolutions, as probably most of you are there listening. But, and that's one of the things that we see this time and time again in our industry. Usually December is a very slow month because people have exhausted their budgets for marketing or internal development or whatever it is, and by that time, so our industry for us here at Motif it slows down as would be expected. Anybody in the advertising or marketing or branding, industry would tell you that. And January is usually a fresh start. We have a lot of new inquiries into rates and costs involved in rebranding, because that's the time when people are ready for a fresh start, for a fresh change, and we got to get that logo updated. And we've talked in the past too, why. A lot of times that's a bad motivation. A lot of times boredom, like business owners come into January and they're like, I just want to roll into 2026 with a fresh look, right? And there's nothing really driving that. So there's always the fallacy of, first of all, are you ready for a rebrand? Are you, is a rebrand necessary? Because there's some companies that rebrand every couple of years and just to change it up, and that's stupid. I don't know how it's better to say it, because there's no real definitive strategy behind it. It's more just because boredom, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about that before, but this is when you're trying to fill in what we call a brand deficit, which is that gap between where you are as a brand in a business and where you want to be.
Right. Yeah. And that deficit, you can feel it. You can feel when you're like, man, I'm just not. When a customer comes to us or a client, and you just feel like your business is like they're not seeing it the way I want to see it. So then I have to, re-educate them. I have to tell them everything. I have to take them through the whole narrative and get them up to speed, and then maybe they'll buy. And it's like that needs to be happening off the get-go, and the brand is part of that. And that's really where this deficit can hurt you over time, where it's like, okay, you're not going to get where you want to go by doing the same thing that got you to where you are now. So you have to change something and be able to start going, okay, what is that? And it's not going to be, again, sometimes businesses can think that, okay, it's this one-time thing. We just need a rebrand, and that will fix this. And it's not so much that as much as it's that time leading up to that reveal, to that rebrand, to that kind of, emergence moment of the reveal. It's all those months going, okay, how am I pivoting? How am I adapting? How am I evolving as a company? Because then that leads up to these moments where you would have a rebrand. Just like Honda in this is like, yeah, technically this is like, you could consider a rebrand, but they've had years where they were strategically going, okay, this will represent the electric forward line, and then we're going to merge it over to the main brand. And there's so many other things going on underneath, the surface, rather than just, here's a new logo. And that's where some of these brand flops we've talked about before, cough, cough, Cracker Barrel, cough, cough, Jaguar. It's like, there's these moments where they're just kind of like, here it is. And they're hoping that this will save the company. Come on, here it is. Come on, everyone, come on. And it's like,
that's the thing is with like, because when we're talking about, typically a rebrand involves a visual change in the logo, in the website, in brand color palette, whatever it is, right? There's a change. That's signals. And that's the whole point of like a redesign of your logo. That signals there's something different. That shouldn't be like, oh, now, and then that's the big neon sign that something's going to be different. Because if you think that just changing the logo, that is going to solve the problems, it doesn't. Because what it does is it signals to everybody that there is something different. So if you're a restaurant that just gives yourself a new logo for your menu, but there's nothing new about your menu, there's nothing increased value about your pricing, about your food. Like if you present a better logo, you better darn be presenting better food. And you've used this analogy before with like, it's like a caterpillar and a butterfly. The butterfly is the logo redesign. It's like, hey, look at me. I am, ta-da, right? But the transformation of the caterpillar started way before, not only with his determination, little green guy with little like 20 little knobby feet, wiggling along, and with the intent, I'm going to be bigger, I'm going to be bolder, this is what I want to do. I don't even know what mentally drives a caterpillar to turn, but I'm just, I'm kind of going out on a limb here. But the idea is that it's made up its mind, it's going to change. Yeah. It prepares itself, it makes the cocoon, it transforms and changes a lot of its internal things, its internal narrative, and then coming out as the new thing, That's the same thing your business and brand need to be going through when you decide to make the decision to rebrand. If you're considering rebranding, but you're like, you know what, we're going to wait till June to rebrand. What are you doing now?
Yeah.
Because now is when you really should be starting the process. Or, as you said, you start the new year with a new look. You should have been last fall. You should have been starting your rebrand.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing of you think of someone, I want to get in shape. I want to be whatever. I want bigger arms or something like that, right? Or I want a 6-pack. It's not a moment in time where you're like, okay, well, on June 1st, that's when I'll have a 6-pack. It's not like, okay, leading up to that. So if you set that time of that transformative moment, that event doesn't create the transformation. It's all that time leading up to that of you eating better, drinking more water, working out, doing whatever, right? To get to that moment. The same thing happens with a rebrand. If you're like, at this moment, I want to rebrand and reveal and really just take things to the next level visually and signal this. I want this new state to clear this brand gap, to clear this brand deficit that I have. Then what are the things that I need to now do in the meantime leading up to that moment, right? That transformative state. And like the caterpillar, it's like going inch by inch by inch by inch, literally, to then go from crawling on the ground to flying. It's like that should be inspiring to you. Is like you stress out about changing products on your shelf or changing your pricing strategy or even just changing your logo, and you have this little insect that's aspiring to go from crawling on the ground to flying. Like what's more, it's like us going, man, I want to fly someday and I'm gonna like work towards this thing. So then to this moment where the caterpillar finds a spot, he's eating or whatever, finds a spot, makes a cocoon, devours himself inside of the cocoon, which is very symbolic of what you need to do to your business, is that you need to devour yourself before you transform. And
what do you mean by that, though?
His stomach acids literally come out.
From a caterpillar. I mean, from a business. Like when you say a business needs to devour itself, I'm not, what exact, like, can you just break that down for a quick second?
For a business, when you do look at these moments of transforming, and that doesn't necessarily mean, okay, that's a complete rebrand, but just these moments of adaptation, of going, I need to hold nothing sacred. I need to be able to go, what is holding me back? Are there menu items or services I've added over time? Are there things I need to subtract? Are there things that I need to? And really, it's like, I've always said that addition leads to division, while subtraction leads to multiplication. It leads to exponential results, because by him doing the ultimate subtraction of devouring yourself, reducing yourself down to, it's like a refinery where then you can multiply and really transform.
Well, it kind of leads into what we've talked about this in other episodes and written chapters in our book about it, but the idea of the almost a self-inventory. It's like that internal, if you're as a person, you're like, I need to change a part of who you are. A lot of times it's a lot of self-evaluation. You have to be open to reflecting. You have to be open to maybe even digging up some stuff in the past, whatever it is, to then process, deal, and move forward. And the thing, I think what you were saying was like, there's a lot of businesses that are stuck. And part of it is, well, that's the way they've always done it. Whatever it is, whatever that is, it could be a method. It could be, well, this is how we've always communicated to our customers. This is how we've always done it, right? And there's, like you said, there should be nothing sacred in your business for you to be able to look at it objectively, to try to say, in order for my business brand to make up that deficit, that brand deficit we're talking about, you start with where you're at. And part of it is how did you get there? And you have to be willing to look at everything. And so that's where it's almost, it's a matter of, it's like sculpting out of clay. It's a process of removing, not adding. You start, or I should say a sculpture. You start with a big slab of granite and you remove, you chip away, and there you have your granite statue. It's like, because you're refining, you're chipping away, you're removing, you're making it more pure. And so it can be painful for a business owner to sometimes have to let go of certain things or adapting to new ways of doing things. Especially, I think, especially this might be more certain of family-owned businesses, where, this is, 2 or 3 generation business. Well, this is the way grandpa did it. This is the way dad always did it. This is the way I'm going to do it, and without questioning whether that was the right thing to be get-go, or was that right for that time period, that market, that way that commerce was done. So I think that's where I think even today it's so funny because even the whole idea of mail catalogs, it's kind of funny for me because I'm like, why, like I still you get you buy one thing, but I get like junk mail from some previous, but it's catalog after catalog, clothes or whatever. I'm like, who shops with catalogs anymore? Yeah. I mean, it's almost like that was pre-internet, but that's something that yes, it works, but it only works for the very select few. The biggest question is that the select few that you're really trying to target the most,
or you adapt it? Like anyone who's ordered anything in proxy of Uline, you forever get their Uline.
Oh my gosh! And that thing is a phone.
The Uline phone book.
That is like a paper. Well, a lot of people don't even know what a phone book is. But yes, I mean like that thing is like it's massive, and I feel bad for the postal workers that have to lug those around.
That's on one side of it, right? Where it's like, okay, this is just yours in their database forever, and you're getting this thing forever. Or Restoration Hardware, they do this beautiful book that's probably of equal, width. And they send that out, and it is a catalog, but it's beautiful. And they make it very architectural, and it's sexy, and it's cool. And it's something that you'd want to put out like on your coffee table. And I'm like, it matches the brand. It's Warren Buffett, I think, invested in Restoration Hardware in like 2021. But they're a legitimate business who took something as ancient as, a phone book and made it match their brand. And I think that's where you look at when we say a business should always be evolving, it's that a business should always be adapting. A business should always be on its toes, playing offense and adapting, because it's survival of the fittest. And that doesn't mean the most athletic or anything like that. Fittest means the best fit. So wherever you are in the timeline, in your market, who fits the best? Because that's what the customer really cares about. And through association, through perceived value, all these things,
trust, through all the other things.
Yeah, they're figuring out that fit. And kind of going back to what Scott was saying about when you do rebrand and it's a signal, it's like that moment when you do, let's say you've been leading up to this rebrand, you've been testing things, strategically positioning, you've been adapting on the operations side, or even subtracting some menu items and offerings. Then you finally do this great rebrand kind of reveal, this great signal to everyone that, hey, we're different now. But the proof must be in the pudding. So it's like, what are you actually saying in that when you do reveal? There has to be something there for them to grasp onto. And I think what's a good example of this is the reassessment that your audience will then do once they do see that. When they see that, hey, things are a little different around here, now come experience that, right? They're going to reassess their value of the brand, of their relationship with the brand, their perceived value. It's like when a business puts up like under new management or whatever, where you go, okay, the customer service there wasn't great before. I'm going to give it another shot. I'm going to go in there. Maybe I did like the atmosphere, but the customer service was horrible. Yeah. And so I think you have to really consider that is that a rebrand is actually, we've written about this as well, is that a rebrand is that moment of reevaluation too. It's a great signal to go, hey, we are, we're turning the chapter, we're turning the page, and we want you to kind of be with us on this journey.
But that's a celebration. It's putting the cart before the horse to think that if you are planning on rebranding this year, it doesn't start with launching your new logo. Yeah. It starts by doing everything else and then allowing the revised business then be reflected by a revised visual brand.
Yeah. And it takes patience. It takes strategy, and strategy is like the best way to leverage time for your benefit is with patience. Patience is the great lever of time. If you're not patient, then time is working against you. You're rushing, you're making haste. Okay, just launch it, just do this. Okay, and everything's kind of like piecemealed. And a really good calculated example of this is that I think is actually like very similar is what Kraft mac and cheese did, where they needed to update ingredients because their ingredients weren't the best, as most people know. So they actually removed some of the bad stuff they had and replaced it with, like plant-based stuff and all that. However, and they changed this across all their mac and cheese. However, they did not tell the audience until months after they had actually rolled out the new product. And then they did this reveal, that is like a rebrand. When you're redesigning like the product and the ingredients, that's right. Change. But
it was undeclared
until months after the market already accepted the new product.
No one noticed.
Well, they did like this big campaign of like, hey, you were part of the biggest taste test experiment in America, and whatever, you passed or something, or we passed. And then from that moment, so right away, if they would have came out of the gates going, hey, we're different, we're healthier now, then automatically with healthier stuff, we think that the quality is dropping or the quality of taste or whatever, or we think it's going to be more expensive or not as good. So they avoided that. But then also the automatic kind of fear that humans have with change was avoided. Just like same thing with your rebrand, like Scott was saying, if you just come out of the gates and go, hey, we're different, and there was nothing that kind of supports that before, then someone's going, okay, they changed. Now it's a little, it's dicey for the consumer. So I think there's kind of ways to go about it.
They would have jaded a lot of their faithful customers that don't eat for health reasons. In other words, they don't shop for health reasons.
Right.
But now what they've done is they showed the people that don't normally would go, wow, I've been eating it for the last 6 months and I didn't know, and I like it. I didn't notice the change. So now they're going to continue buying it. And so that's where, again, it was a signal that something has changed, not something is going to change.
Right, yeah. And if they would have just come out with new ingredients, new recipe, healthier than ever, it would have created a placebo effect of someone going, I like the old one better. And you see this all the time with products where they'll do that, and then someone's like, it's not as good as the old one, even though they actually are just making that up because they think there's a difference, when it's like, hey, these companies have labs and labs of people who are...
Well, it wasn't true with New Coke.
Exactly. I guess with your business, it's like thinking about going, if we're always adapting, always evolving, and then you do have this moment of rebranding and reflecting that out and signaling it to your audience, thinking of it as not a one-time event. Because that's really just going to shoot yourself in the foot. And it's a short-term mindset. It's really just not how you should be thinking as a business, because like we've said before, I think ever since episode 1, honestly, is that brand thinking is long-term thinking. It's strategic thinking by default. So strategy, long-term thinking isn't a one-time event. You're not trying to time the market. You're not trying to do these things. You're spending time in the market. You're being strategic, and you're laying things out and thinking ahead. And it's like you have to do that. And your rebrand is part of that, but you're thinking ahead towards that rebrand.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fresh year ahead of us. And if it's been on your mind to rebrand your business, again, starts with willingness to look in the mirror, take a hard look, assessing where you're at, what got you there, what works, what doesn't work. Be willing to look at anything. Be willing to sacrifice anything in your business. Start making those small changes. Then it's a time when you're signaling to your market space, hey, everybody, there's something new about us besides just a better looking logo.
Thanks for listening. Yep. Until next time. Cheers.
Cheers.